Okay, everyone, so this is part two of a sit down chat that I got to have recently with George Kalajian, who is the owner and CEO of Tom's Sons International Pleating, a five-generation family owned professional pleating business in the heart of the New York fashion district. They have worked with all kinds of big names in the fashion world. If you'd like to learn more about who George is and what their business does, then please be sure to watch part one, which will be linked for you in the description. In this part two, we're getting down to the very exciting business of talking and brainstorming about creating my very own vintage inspired dream skirt and how we're going to go about doing that. I'll be showing photos of the kind of look I want to achieve, and George will be basically explaining how we're going to make that happen and incorporate beautiful, beautiful pleats into this skirt. So let's jump into it.
Okay, so these are the photos that I sent to you. So I compiled a few sort of skirt ideas that I like. They aren't all necessarily pleated. Some of them are just kind of showing the overall shape and the overall look that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And we could pleat those. So I am definitely going for, of course, a more vintage aesthetic. I love A-line or circle skirts.
Okay.
And I'd like to find a way to incorporate this sort of triangular shaped yoke that you see in the
Okay.
first photo.
Okay.
I think that's a really cool sort of Edwardian era detail in skirts that I really like.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards a poly fabric. I guess the first question I have in terms of fabric is, are all polyester fabrics that you would work with, or do they all kind of have a silk look, or are there polys that have more of like a wool look, for example?
There's polys that have a linen look, a wool look. There's multiple. There's a crepey look. There's light and fluffy. There's heavy and meaty.
Okay.
There's everything. So if you say to me, I want this to look more like a wool, or I want
Mhm.
it to be stiff like a taffeta, then I can find the appropriate fabric for you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, because I love the silky looking fabrics, but for this time of year, I'm feeling more like something a bit heavier, like a wool or yeah, or even a taffeta. I actually have an actual silk taffeta skirt that I just love, and it's one of my favorites. So probably a wool or a taffeta look, I'm thinking.
So are you thinking like a sunburst accordion pleated skirt under this?
I think for this one with the triangular yoke, it would be more suited to like a very small knife pleat sort of thing.
Okay, so would you like a knife sunburst?
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, the sunburst is
Is
the one
this
that's
if
A-line, right?
yeah, if you want this kind of exaggerated belling, you definitely want sunburst. You
Yeah,
definitely
not
want
the
sunburst.
rectangular one. Yeah.
So the knife pleat that's good about the knife pleat is it will lay flat over there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're sewing that, it'll lay flat. So that's totally can be done with a knife pleat. Um, and obviously you're gonna have to create some kind of an understructure to give that amount of fabric to stick up, you know. In that one, they could have there could be a lining or some kind of a petticoat underneath there, but
Right.
also it could just be that they put some kind of horsehair in the hem. But
Yeah.
when you're doing pleats, it's going to flop down. So you're going to need something on top of that to hold up the pleats in the way that you want it.
Okay, so that it leads me to some questions then. So let's say I was going to do an interlining.
Okay.
Would that work with professional pleating? And if so, at what stage would the interlining come into the process?
So when you say interlining, what are you asking me? Are you asking me, can you pleat with something else, or are you asking me what is it exactly you mean by that?
Well, like you said, if I want this skirt to have that A-line sort of poofy structure, if I was going to do this at home, for example, I might mount the fabric onto silk organza or something just with a little bit more stiffness, and I would use that as an interlining and just work with the
Oh,
two layers as if they're one. So how would that work if I was having it professionally pleated?
so that would be which way you would go would be dependent on how you wanted to design it.
Okay.
Would I recommend you attaching it to another fabric as if it was one? If you did, I would say you would have to bond it. like thoroughly bonded, like how the leather is, right?
Like with a fusible sort of thing, you're saying.
Correct. You're fusible, which kind of seems to be counterintuitive
Yeah,
because
yeah.
then the pleats won't open. So the
Right.
next thing would be to just put a lining underneath it
Mhm.
and just attach to that either put a lining underneath it, almost like the lining could almost be like a poodle skirt lining where it's really big and you put a heavy horsehair around it, or narrower an A-line lining underneath it and then just stitch like some gathered tulle underneath it to give it that volume.
Okay.
That's what I would say. I would say the the second one where you just have an A-line fabric, an A-line lining underneath it, and then put a little bit of tulle around it would probably be the best thing.
Mhm.
And then you can just determine how much of it you want to put. And do you want to put one row on the bottom? Do you want to have two rows? And that's something that you can play and shape yourself.
Okay, so when you say rows of tulle, are you talking about like horizontal rows like
Correct.
this?
Yeah. Correct.
Oh,
Yeah. Correct.
okay.
Say if you want, I can pleat some tool or for some tool. I can pleat some tool for you,
Mhm.
and you can take that, cut it, and stitch it underneath there.
Okay, so it would be stitched in between the outer and the lining then, or under everything?
A lot more elaborate, and this is a lot more work. But basically, take one of these rows and just stitch it to a lining. Um, how you want to construct it is up to you. Whether you want to put one lining or two linings, you
Mm.
could have one lining that is touching your body, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you could have another lining that is in there, and that lining could have a row of this stitched on it.
Like
You
at the
could
bottom?
at the bottom,
Right.
yes, at the bottom,
Mhm.
exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And you could have potentially one row or two rows. That's where the shaping comes into play, as far as like what shape do you want it
Right.
to look like, you know?
Yeah, or then a totally easier option would be wearing it over a petticoat, as you said. I do have
Correct.
silk chiffon, very floofy petticoat that is about the right length, so I could do that as well.
That would probably be better because then you have two looks. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I
you
can
don't
have
have
either one. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, I would say that's that. And then as far as sloping of the top,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could help you with that, but basically it's pretty easy when it's flat pleats. You just put the pleats down on the table, you take your pattern, put it on top, and just follow the slope of your pattern piece and just cut it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. In your opinion, what type of pleats would look best to sort of simulate this skirt look, but in a more pleated sort of way? Like, you think knife pleats or like maybe really tiny accordion pleats?
I actually see ginormous accordion pleats. I think,
Ginormous. Okay.
yeah, I think that that would look much more dramatic.
Okay.
The thing is this, is that if you want to sometimes puff out the skirt and sometimes not puff out the skirt, it would be better to go with an accordion pleat than a side pleat. Okay?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because the accordion is just whatever it is. You can make it 100% stand up, or you can just wear it tight to your body and it'll be very slimming. So
Right.
that's much more versatile. Whereas if it's the side pleats, if you make it look like big and dramatic, when you take out the petticoat, it might be very a lot of fabric in there, which might look cool or it might not look cool. Again,
I see.
that's really up to the testing, and that's what we always do for with our clients. Like they're always testing these concepts, and they see
Okay, so
what they
that's an
like.
interesting point. So what does the testing process look like?
The testing process would be typically if this was some company who had no budget in mind, what
Mhm.
they would do is they would come with two or three fabrics
Mhm.
for this skirt, and they would order one panel first of each of these fabrics, and they would just kind of like look at it, put it on the dress form maybe, and just see how does it move.
Okay.
If they wanted to take it to the next level, or if they were unsure whether they want to do accordion or side, they would order one of each of them. So you would say 3 fabrics, 2 panels each, that's 6 panels. Then they would probably choose to make an actual garment. Some people don't like to work with like a panel to see. Some people are just like, we need to see an entire garment. And so they'll launch 3 to 6 skirts just for them to see and show the powers that be what is it going to look like. So
Okay.
it totally depends. But yeah, I would say 1 panel of each to see which one you like more.
Okay.
Usually when you see the fabric pleated, you're like, yes.
Yeah, I think I'd be able to tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say I'm leaning towards this first skirt that I've already shown you the most out of all of these. So let's just assume we're gonna make this skirt.
Okay.
What would the patterning process look like that collaboration between both of us?
Okay. If we did, I would recommend starting with accordion because it'll be the logical next first step, because making a pattern for a side pleat is a little bit more math.
Okay. Okay.
And less margin of error for precision. Should say that there's more
Alright.
precision involved in side pleats, which is why you don't see many side pleated sunburst skirts out there. That's actually the reason why you don't see that many.
Oh, okay. You
Yeah,
need,
you
need more precision for side pleats than accordion pleats, is what you're saying?
sunburst side pleats.
Sunburst. Okay. I guess
Sunburst
that
side,
makes sense because you have to figure out how they're all going to be angled to fill up that triangular space.
and plus you need to know exactly what is the correct radius to cut out to fit into that waist. There's no margin of error. And
Right.
usually the pleaters in the world are kind of like, they're over there and they send you something and then you have to kind of figure it out. And
Right.
usually the workrooms are just trying to like make it work. And there's
Mhm.
no real understanding between like that bridge between them.
Mm.
So if you started with accordion, this is the way it would be. I would have you read a particular page in my book where
Mhm.
you would have to figure out what is the radius of your waist. Okay.
Mhm.
I would have you make out the pattern piece and I'd have you cut it, assuming you wanted to do that. If you wanted us to do it, we can do it. But I would have you make the pattern and cut it out and send it to us. Depending on the fabric, I would say most probably I would say don't get it hemmed before you send it to us.
Mhm.
But that's basically it. You would just make the pattern, which is pretty simple as far as I'm concerned. It's just 2 circles. And that's it. And you cut it. So for something like this, I would say you need to have probably 2.5 yards of space
Okay.
to cut it. If
Mhm.
you don't have 2.5 yards, we could make it go right with 1.5 yards, like 45 inches.
Okay. 2.5 yards of the fabric. Okay. Is there any specific, let me think, like 2.5 yards of length, like that you buy? Is there any specific width, or it just depends on how long you want your skirt?
It depends on, so the width, so 40, so for something like this, I think that 45-inch goods is the
Okay.
narrowest that you would use, and that's the minimal amount for 45 inches. Now synthetics usually don't come 45 inches. Nowadays they're usually in the 58 inch, 60 inches width of goods.
Okay.
If you were trying to be economical, sometimes you can really save a lot of money when you cut your panels interlocked. Meaning that you're cutting one panel like this, and then the next panel you're cutting like this, and the next panel you're cutting like this. Sometimes you can save a lot of money depending on how wide the fabric is and how narrow or how small your circle is. So when we get to that point, then I can help you how to cut it. Like in the back of our book, there's very specific layouts for cutting bias circles. I could talk for hours on the mechanics and the math of bias circle skirt cutting.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, circles, circles are what we do here all day, all night. Most of the time, evening gowns are all about circles, whether they be one giant circle or millions of baby circles that are all flounces and all that stuff. So yeah, so that's what I would say. So once we isolate what fabric you want, so the next step would be for me to get from you what you actually want. Um, I'll have my interns run around and swatch stuff, send them to you. You pick what it is. You get me some measurements of what this is going to be like. From there, I will figure out what is the math of that. And then I would tell you why I'm doing that math. And we would get the fabric, send it to you. You would cut it and send it back to us.
Okay.
Now, there's another important thing to think about, which is determining the number of panels you want to put in your skirt.
I was just
Okay.
gonna ask about that.
Yeah.
So is this like a circle skirt then you're thinking?
So yes, this is a minimum of 2 panels.
Like
Mm,
like a half circle, like 2 half circles, you're saying?
Correct. So yes. So circle skirts, not pleated circle skirts, are complete circles. Okay. In the pleating world, they're always semicircles.
Okay.
So you add to that in increments of semicircles. So so we would consider one semicircle to be 1 panel. Okay.
Okay.
So
And when you say semicircle, are you talking about a half circle?
a half a circle,
A half. Okay.
180 degrees.
Okay. All right. That makes
Okay.
sense. But you have more fullness in there than a non-pleated circle skirt. Of
And
course.
you would put in as many 180 degrees panels as you feel you want.
Okay.
So you could put one 180 degree panel, or you can put 2 or 3 or 10 or 28. It really depends on what you want. But I will say this, 95% of the time it's 2 panels, right? And in my opinion, there's a night and day difference between 2 panels and 3 panels. If you add that one extra panel, it really makes a difference,
A positive difference or just a difference?
A positive difference in the sense of aesthetics, depending on your fabric. Now, you're adding more fabric, you're adding more weight, you're adding more expense. That's why you won't, if you go out and if you go shopping, you will probably never see a 3-panel skirt.
No. Yeah, almost
It's
never.
very rare. It's very rare because, I've never made a 2-panel skirt for anyone. Like my wife and my friends, I always make them 3 panels or more. Like my wife's wedding dress, I put 7 panels.
Wow.
Put 7 panels, and there was just the skirt of my wife's dress had 35 yards of fabric, if you include the train as well. Yeah. So, and that skirt took over a week just to pleat her skirt.
Wow. That sounds beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And then when we were pleating it, the skirt kind of looked like an octopus, like tentacles.
Wow.
So it looked so cool. I left it like that. So her train and her whole dress were like octopus tentacles. I only cut the front of the dress. So that she wouldn't trip and break her nose on her wedding day.
Oh, that sounds so beautiful.
For yours, we could go either way, 2 or 3, depends on the fabric, how it looks. But I almost think that I will say this, that if when you're moving and walking, like three panels makes a difference.
I'm leaning towards 3 because I already know that I really love lots of volume in my skirt.
Okay.
I really love more of the A-line shape.
Okay.
So
then
I'm
we're doing 3.
3. Yeah.
Then we're doing 3.
Okay.
This skirt is going to be a work of art, trust me.
Well, I'm excited.
Good.
Okay. So if we're doing accordion pleats and we have this triangular yoke at the top, are we going to accommodate for that before or after the pleating is done?
We're going to think about it
Okay.
before it's done. Okay.
Okay.
So when you send me your measurements, what you would like it to be, I will think about it, because the thing is this, is that, depending on how much shirring you want to add at the top over there where the triangle is meeting, will determine how much, how low you're going to cut in the panel. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and the lower you cut in the panel, the shorter your skirt will become. So
Right.
usually in these situations, somebody says, I want a 20-inch skirt. Well, I'll make the skirt like 3-4 inches higher and 3-4 inches longer,
Okay.
because the amount that you choose in the sunburst dictates a lot about the look. So the
Mm-hmm.
higher of the portion you use, the smaller the waist measurement or the less the shirring. The
Okay.
lower you go down, the more the shirring.
Right.
So I'm going to leave that to you, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do so that you can play and figure out how you want it to be done.
Could you explain the shirring to me a little more? So are you saying that we have to do some kind of shirring in order to compress the pleats to be able to attach to the waist portion?
In panel, this is a muslin, and if you look here, there are multiple lines. Okay,
Mhm.
these lines are saying RW. So RW is a term that we invented. It's part of our language here, which
Mhm.
means radius of the waist.
Okay.
The radius. So there's a baby circle at the top of this. Now, after pleating, it becomes straight, right? So if you expand this, it's a semicircle,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And these lines are also circular.
Yeah.
If you look here, it's telling you that an RW7 is 21 inches of fabric, and RWA is 24 inches, right?
Okay.
So the longer it gets, the lower you cut or the bigger you cut the circle, the more fabric you have here for shirring. I'm just saying that from the viewpoint of how do you want the pleats when the pleats are matching going into wherever the seam is, how much fabric do you want there, right?
Okay.
So
Mhm.
if you want a lot of fabric, a lot of gathering, like your skirt has a lot of gathering there, that
Mhm.
means that you would cut here as opposed to here. You see that all the lower you go, there's more fabric there.
You need more width, I see.
Right. So this is a
Or
circle,
a bigger
right?
circle.
Yeah. So for every inch, if you remember high school geometry, it's
Mhm.
pi is 3.14.
Mhm.
So basically, for every inch that your radius gets bigger, it's 3 inches more fabric.
Okay. That makes
So one
sense.
1 inch, 3 inches, 1 inch, 3 inches. So basically, you are going to decide. So you're going to start with like 7 inches. You might go to 7 inches, cut it, put it, go on the dress form, pin that, put your yoke on top of it, and look at it and be like, okay, do I like that? Is
Mm.
that enough? Like, is it spreading enough? Sometimes you don't really have the choice, because if you're going to take this and spread it over a body, right, you can't spread the top. There isn't enough room. You have to go lower and lower and lower. So
Mhm.
now there's a relationship here between the RW, your waist measurement, and the size of the pleats.
Mm.
Because the
Mhm.
more shirring you want, the lower you go. The lower you go, the bigger the pleat gets.
Right. Okay.
So what do you do? How do you handle that? You
Mm.
handle that by increasing the pleat count. Most people don't know how to communicate about pleats, even in the industry here. So the industry, they come to me, they're like, I want a pleated skirt. I wanted a 1/4 inch at the top and I wanted 1 1/4 inch at the bottom. That's not how you communicate about pleats, because I have no idea of knowing, you know, what's the waist measurement? How many panels are you putting? I can't control that without the whole picture. This particular thing, this particular piece here is 48 pleats in one semicircle. So that's how you communicate about a sunburst pleating panel. You say, I want a 48 pleat panel. I want a 30 pleat panel. I want a 70 pleat panel. I want a 60 pleat panel. So if you're going down, it means your pleats are getting bigger. If you want your pleats to get smaller, you need to add more pleats here. So that's the relationship between the waist and the pleat count. And usually most people don't understand there's more. This is like a multifaceted equation, because the more you add pleats, that changes drape and dynamics. The less you add, it makes it look different. It's more soft and flow. Like there, it's a little bit more of a complicated thing. Which, in order for me to illustrate that to you, it would be great if you wanted me to. I can totally do it, but I would definitely have to prepare all of my props and show you, and I would have to draw it for you so you totally got the math of what's happening when it comes to a sunburst pleat. But I will tell you this, nobody knows about this. I'm constantly explaining this to people, whether they work for the biggest fashion company in the universe or they just came out of school, they don't know this, which is why the last chapter of our book is based on how you actually communicate about pleating, because there is no standard. People
Okay.
come to me and they're like, I want to pleat like this. I want it to go like this. That's not an explanation. That's not communicating.
Need the actual numbers.
Exactly.
I understand. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, what would you say looking at this picture? I mean, I know this isn't pleated. It looks like it's gathered, but
I'm gonna show you. Once we decide the fabric, I'm gonna show you either a 48 pleat or a 30 pleat.
okay.
And I'm gonna see what you like, what you think looks good. And then once we figure out how much you're gonna cut down, we'll also determine that.
Okay.
So maybe what we'll do is maybe you can make the yoke, right? Send it to us, at least one portion of the yoke, you know what I mean? Or just the general slope. We can put on the form and we can pin some muslins there, and then we can show you what it'll kind of look like over there.
Okay, that would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, now this point that we're doing, like this level of hand holding, we would consider that to be part of our development process. You know what I mean? Like this is not something we would normally do for someone who's like, yeah, give me 3 panels. Okay, thanks, bye. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this we're
I
now crossing.
appreciate it.
No. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this, because people need to see this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People need to understand, like, it's not that easy, because a lot of times people come and they're like, give me pleats. And I'm like, okay, or what's the price? And I'm like, well, it depends. Regular pleats. I just want regular pleats.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I mean, like, sunburst accordion is as regular as it gets. And you see already, like,
Yeah.
there's so much more to this.
Yeah.
There's so much more to this. So a lot of the clothing that is out there is really made with no thought to this. It's just a garment is seen. It's made by this particular company. That company buys the sample and then they just duplicate it and then they get it. And that's the problem with fast fashion, is that it's just this recycling of the same thing. Maybe they might tweak something, but there's no real unique creation here. Like, there's no creation for a purpose of an effect. And so usually when a customer talks to me and says to me, what is the effect they're trying to create? If you want drama, I can help you create drama. I can help you create something that's aesthetic, or I should say something that you find to be aesthetic. So by doing these things and showing people like you, and you're like, oh my God, and I see your face, I'm like, okay, good. This is her solution. This is what she wants. And then you love it and you're going to keep it for the rest of your life. And that's the most important thing.
Well, beautiful. I'm excited.
Good. All right, good. We have a plan now. That's great.
We do have a plan.
Okay, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed part 2 of this chat with George Kalajian, and make sure you stay tuned to this channel for when we'll be coming out with more videos about the actual making process of my vintage inspired dream skirt. I'll see you on the next video.